Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Tim Weber, and I am proud to be the superintendent here at Wyoming City Schools. And I am excited to welcome you to this important discussion as we continue to create a plan for our primary facilities that support student success now and in the future. Incredibly important conversation. And it's great as I look out in the room. I think this community forum really represents what I say is so special about the Wyoming community. And I think about the fact that we have parents, we have teachers, we might even have some students I know that have been engaged at different points along the way, administrators and community members, community leaders, all connecting together to discuss matters that are important to our community. So I say thank you for showing up, thank you for being engaged, thank you for investing time and energy into this important conversation, especially on a night when it's 74 degrees and it's sunny outside. It felt really hard to bring everybody inside. We just couldn't shift this to the outdoors, but if we could have, we would have. So I want to give just a little bit of background before we get started today. Our focus on the primary facilities has stretched over the last 3 years. It began with the work of our Citizens Advisory Committee in 2021 and 2022. This team of community members and school staff, they completed a study of our primary facilities and came away with two main recommendations. The first recommendation was that we needed to make improvements to our primary facilities in order to provide all students with an optimal learning experience. The second recommendation that came from the Citizens Advisory Committee, or the CAC, was that we needed to include stakeholders in the decision-making process. So over the last 2 years, we followed the work of our CAC team, and we continue to work on possible solutions to our primary facilities. And I'm excited to present to you the latest updates from that work tonight. I would say, though, critical to this process is the amazing engagement from our primary facilities steering committee. This is a committee that's made up of 39 total members, and that includes 24 community members, 8 staff members, 4 administrators, 2 board members, and our architect. There's a great diversity within this group in areas such as geographical location within Wyoming, professional experience that these individuals bring to the table, and variance as to whether or not these individuals have students that are currently in our schools, students that have gone through our schools, or students that are will soon to be in our schools, or no students in our schools at all. And so the perspectives from this committee have been wonderful to engage with. I thought it was important too to share some of the backgrounds that these individuals bring to the team. So just to share a few, and again, this is just a few. We have data specialists, architect, project and program managers, teachers, human resources, director of information technology, realtor, Ohio Department of Education program specialists, small business owners, finance, construction, strategic planning consultant, business analyst, and higher ed administration. Again, just a few of the backgrounds that add to the richness of that committee. And so what I would ask right now is for all of the members of the primary facility steering committee, if you could please stand so that we can recognize you for the work that you've done and for the work that is yet to truly amazing people within that group, and it's fascinating to look at what I've been able to learn from these individuals, so thank you again. Just wanted to share a little bit about the process for tonight, and so we're going to shift gears here in just a little bit to our presentation for the evening. And as we do that, you are going to hear from our architect, Mike Ridgely, our treasurer, Rhonda Johnson, and our primary schools principal, Dr. Gina Kirschner. After the presentation, there might be a chance that you still have questions that you want to ask. And if you would like to do that, we will have all of our primary facility steering committee members come down to the front, and we encourage anyone with questions to please come down and connect with one of those individuals to help get answers to the questions that you have. And so tonight, as we shift gears to the presentation, you will be hearing lots and lots of very detailed information. But I think what's important for me to realize is that there are 3 key highlights that you'll probably connect with within this conversation. The first highlight, I think, is the fact that our school buildings are more than 70 years old. Our primary school buildings are more than 70 years old, and they have limitations related to safety, accessibility, and educational opportunity. The second highlight that I wanted to surface is that the proposed solution to address these limitations includes the construction of 3 new buildings located on the 3 current primary school sites. That's important to know. And the third highlight is that you are going to hear specifics about 2 different options for potential grade configurations. But it's important to know that both of these options address the limitations that we've identified. That was important to our committee, and it's been part of the work that has gone on over the past several months. So I wanted to make sure that I shared those 3 highlights. So with that said, I just want to again say thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for dedicating time to this important work, and thank you for your commitment to the students of Wyoming City Schools. At this time, I'd like to welcome my director.
Thank you, Tim. My name is Mike. We have a busy agenda tonight, so let's get into it. Just a little overview of this. Take a step back and talk about existing building issues and constraints district-wide. Talk about the process. Rhonda will talk about some finance updates. Then we'll reveal our 2 master plan options. We're down from 8 to 2. So a lot of work has been done, and we're anxious to talk about that. We'll introduce the idea of options for exploring for swing space, talk about a survey, next steps, and then chatting with the steering community at the end. First up, space needs at Hilltop. So this is a floor plan of Hilltop. You'll see the buildings separated, and this is a building that you can walk outdoors to get from one unit to the other. So this issue of Hilltop lacking a secure perimeter, a secure vestibule, and accessibility is a major issue at Hilltop because each of these individual buildings are at different levels. There's a lack of administrative space, a lack of classroom space, particularly not all the classrooms are the right size. It's lacking in special education space for gifted intervention. There's no dedicated art or music space. There's a desire for a stage and a general lack of storage. So when we said, okay, what type of space would you need to meet your minimum space needs? We went through a programming process and determined we need about 47,700 square feet at Hilltop. So that's an addition that would be about almost 17,000 square feet. Now, we're not proposing an addition at that location, but this is just kind of order of magnitude for a visual of the kind of space issues we're seeing. So that would be it. Basically, current Hilltop is about 55% too small to meet your educational needs. Over at Elm, many of the same issues, lack of secure vestibule, lack of appropriately sized and located administrative space, same issues with classrooms, special ed intervention, etc. Also, here in particular, we have a student dining room and gym that are shared, that are undersized, as well as a really small kitchen. So at Elm, same thing, we looked at how much space would be needed to meet your minimum educational requirements. That was requiring about a 10,500 square feet addition. And again, we're not proposing an addition on this side of Elm because that's where your playground is, and it's a really tight site, which just kind of gives you, again, an order of magnitude of what a building that's about 47% too small feels like. Over at Vermont, nearly identical issues and space needs at Elm. And again, this is 32,900 square feet would be required to meet your minimum requirements. This building is almost 60% too small. So that blue dot here, the blue box gives you that visual of how much space we would need. And next up for these story slides, I'm going to bring up Gina, our resident expert in all things. And I'm just going to do a little tag team these and go together. First, I'll start. This is a view at Hilltop, and this is what it looks like under the belly of Hilltop, where you see the educational wings separated.
And I think it's really important to note here that I think a lot of times we picture our students moving throughout the day and across the campus with their teacher or with their classmates at all times. And the reality is sometimes they do need to do things like go to the clinic or go to the library separately. And so we do end up with our very own students sometimes walking in this outdoor campus, not necessarily with their teacher.
This is a picture just showing a couple examples of the accessibility issues. There is an ADA ramp, but you'll see kind of the great difference between these buildings, a couple different locations.
Yeah, and I think the thing to know here is particularly at Hilltop, we have major accessibility issues, and we have ramps that have been built, but especially when it's very cold or raining, that can be really challenging for our students. If we click into the next one to see the vestibule here, you'll see that there's steps even to get into the cafeteria and the gym. And we have elevators that are just kind of small lifts that get students from point A to point B. And those are actually no longer working, and we can't get carts for those. And so when we have students that even temporarily have mobility issues, that can really present a challenge.
And then the secure vestibule is a theme district-wide. Here's a picture at Elm where you walk through the vestibule, and then once granted access, you're in the building.
Yeah, and to Mike's point, just as soon as you enter the door and we buzz you in, you will have immediate access to the classroom areas.
Administrative spaces, district-wide, but this one is at Elm, are very tight, and you can see the remote location of the secretary relative to the front door.
Okay, I can talk a little bit to these intervention spaces. So what you're looking at here is actually a cutout in the back of the library at Elm. And so we tried to create some small group spaces for intervention classes like occupational therapy or math intervention. And the reality of it is that because we are trying to add on these spaces to carve out a place for small group instruction, there are fire codes that prevent us from actually going all the way to the ceiling. So you'll see here that these bookcases that kind of make a divider don't go all the way up. So if you have a small group happening here and then a library class happening right on the other side of the wall, that doesn't make for a great situation for our youngest learners to be able to really have focused instructional time.
Also evidence of the lack of special ed and intervention gifted spaces is kind of the scene down the hallway with the individual desks out there.
Yes, so in many cases, our interventions take place in the hallways at the same time as students and teachers are moving about from place to place.
Here's an example of a special ed room. It's about 167 square feet. And even though the wide angle camera kind of makes this look big, it's really small and really jammed. So in our proposed program, we are putting in 275 square feet for these spaces, which is a 65% space increase.
Absolutely, and sometimes we have up to 4 students in here at a time, which when you get them in there with all of the things and the teacher, it can be a pretty tight space to have that reading intervention take place.
Art, there's no dedicated for rooms for art or music in any of the primary schools. So this is an example of art materials, supplies, drying racks occurring in hallways.
Yes, and actually at both Elm and Vermont, there is not a dedicated space for art and music, and our art and music teachers do a fantastic job making things happen, but you can imagine how difficult it would be to transport wet paintings that children have just done and get those in storage, like in hallway and closet spaces in between classes as those projects are ongoing. And then the same kind of thing with music. In the next slide, it just shows that all of our music equipment is actually stored in hallways and in the teacher lunchroom. And then those materials get taken into the gym for our students to have music class.
And the last up, the classroom size is small, district-wide, and this is just an example of your teachers doing a great job of being organized, but just kind of show you what they're packing in.
Yes, and so to teach primary students, it takes a lot of stuff. It takes a lot of materials to do good hands-on learning, and all of those things, all those curricular materials take storage space, and so you can see this is an example of every square inch of space being used to get everything in there. The other thing I want to point out is just where the student belongings are, and that sometimes just having students have their coats and all of those same things kind of piled in that one space can present some issues.
kitchen space, district-wide is an issue. This is a photo of your kitchen and serving line at Vermont. And this is a photo of what the kitchen serving area looks like at home.
And again, our kitchen workers do an amazing job preparing food for our students, but I think it's important to note that we don't actually prepare any food on site for our kids, and we don't actually store any food on site. It all gets brought in every single day, and can create some issues when we haven't got an exact count or someone changes their mind on what they're having for lunch, which is a regular occurrence for our little guys. That can definitely create some problems.
And then last up is a clinic picture of Vermont.
Yes, and this, I don't know that this picture really does it justice, but this is the clinic at Vermont. And you can see here that our clinic aide is in this same room, and this little cot that is here is where we have our sick kiddos. And sometimes, like right now, we're going through a bout of some flu and some strep and that kind of thing, and our kiddos get sick at school. And so they make their way here to this really tight space. And we were kind of chuckling. By third and fourth grade, our kiddos can't even lie down on this cot. It's super, super tiny. So it just kind of paints the picture of how small those spaces are.
Thank you so much, Gina. Next up, just a little update on our process. We started last summer to the community conversations and listening. And at that session, we heard really clearly that the community wanted to see a lot of options for consideration moving forward. Those were developed in the fall. There were 8 options presented at our first community forum in October. Tim mentioned the Facilites Steering Committee was put together in the fall. There was a traffic analysis, geotechnical report. We got our hands around the budget, engaged with the Board of Education, and did some online feedback. Here we are today, early spring of 2024, with the work and the engagement of the Facilities Steering Committee. We have narrowed down the options from 8 to 2. We continue to engage with the board, and here we are tonight at Community Forum 2 for an update. We'll follow this with a statistically valid community survey, and our hope is by late spring to be at a point where we've decided on the final master plan. And if so, that'll go before the Board of Education, who could be in a position in June to decide to put this on the ballot on November 5th, 2024. Next up, I'm going to introduce Rhonda to talk about finance.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Rhonda Johnson, and I serve as the treasurer for Wyoming City Schools. Thank you all for being here tonight. Before we can move on to the specifics of the options, it's important to review key pieces of finance information. We are going to do a little math in this section, so if school finance math is your thing, this might be your favorite part. Anybody? I'm sure Dale is here, so yes. That's one at least. So when Ohio Public Schools need funds for construction, we would need to run a bond levy or pass a bond issue. And the bond would be for the grand amount of the project, and then the school district would sell bonds or issue debt, and then we would receive that revenue in a big lump sum. Over the next 37 years, we would assess property taxes annually to taxpayers, and then the district receives that revenue, and we make the principal and interest payments on the debt. That sounds pretty similar to something that you might be familiar with in your own life, sort of like a mortgage, where you get all the money up front, and then you repay the principal and interest payments over the life of the debt. A little different in that we use kind of some funky terms when we do this in Ohio Public School Finance, like mills and assessed valuation. So when we think about property taxes, we think about them in terms of mills. A mill, as defined in Ohio law, is 1/10 of 1%. You represent that mathematically, it's 0.001. And mills translate into revenue for school districts or any government agency by multiplying the millage times the assessed property value. And assessed property value is different than market value, and we've all sort of gotten a big lesson in that in the past few months, right? We're all very familiar now with, or you might not have been as in tune with that, we're all very familiar with that now. 35% of your market value is your assessed value. So we pay millage on assessed value, not market, and it's 35%. So very, very simply, one mill would cost the owner of a $100,000 market home $35 a year. Okay, we're going to do a little bit more complicated math in a second. Okay, so when we think about bond issues, Wyoming has 2 bond issues currently outstanding. One from 1998, when our taxpayers approved a $24 million bond issue to renovate Wyoming High School. That was passed at 8.2 mils. We are currently assessing 3.36 mils, and the great news about this one is we're paying it off in December of 2024. So this December, we will make our final payment on this debt. And what's really awesome is that this debt was actually originally voted on to be paid off in 2027, but we have refinanced it a few times, so we're paying it off 3 years early. And you all, of course, you would know that that makes sense because that saves on interest, and so we've been able to save taxpayer millage over the life of the debt when it's been refinanced. So 14 years after the high school debt in 98, the Wyoming taxpayers approved a middle school bond issue in 2012. A $25 million bond issue that was voted, approved at 4.79 mils. That's also been refinanced or refunded, again, to achieve savings in interest as interest rates went down. Of course, that's not the interest rate environment that we're in right now, but during interest rate environment when it was favorable, we had to refinance that debt in order to save millage, and that millage is currently being assessed at 2.64. When we think about our primary schools, just a little fun fact, the bond issues for our current primary schools for Vermont was passed in 1951, Elm was passed in 1954, and Hilltop was passed in 1956. And obviously those have all been paid off. A little before my time. Okay, so when we think about bond issues for our new primary facilities, we have to talk a little bit about timing. So when we were together in October, we were talking about this important concept of our new assessed valuation. And when we talked in October, it really wasn't final yet. And so now we've sort of turned the page from 2023 to 2024, and we know when values went up, we know what our total AV is as a district. So you add up all the property values in Wyoming, homes and business property, and you see our current AV there on the screen. That is important because Ohio law limits the amount of debt that school districts and government agencies can issue. And that is a super complicated formula. And again, my good friend Dale in the audience on the committee spent a lot of time looking at that. And if you love school finance, I would love to review with you because it is something that I get super excited about. But it's important to know that the current calculation limits our debt to $68.4 million. So when Mike shared that we worked through the fall to figure out what our budget was, we are only allowed to borrow $68.4 million at this time. And so when we started generating cost estimates for potential primary solutions, it's important to know that they were all in the $75 million range for using all 3 sites. And so we did have to back down that budget a little bit because we know that we cannot borrow more than $68.4 million. And also important to mention is when we think about this calculation moving forward, we did do some projection analysis thinking about if Wyoming needs another bond issue in the next maybe 15 to 20 years. You know, what might our debt capacity look like then? And so when we projected these values out, we feel like this is, when I speak about timing, this is a great time to be having this conversation. Our high school debt is expiring. It's a great time to borrow money in terms of our ability to borrow based on our AV. And when you project the values out, we're comfortable that we would be able to meet any future needs, any future building needs in the district. So most people just want to kind of get down to the nitty-gritty and say, how much is this going to cost? And so if we think about a new $68.4 million bond issue for primary schools, and that is estimated to be a 7.53 mil tax levy. And so the cost of that, again, this is for a $100,000 home. We are crystal clear that there are homes of other values in this community. But this $100,000 is a super quick multiplier that you can just take and apply it to your own home situation. So for a $100,000 home, a 7.53 mil tax levy is $263.55. But we know that we're paying off our high school debt at the end of 2024. So that millage is coming off. So the net cost is $145.95 per $100,000 home. So I did just want to kind of give you a little bit of perspective. Just quick math, a $400,000 home would be about $584 annually, or about $49 a month, if you think about what that would cost in terms of monthly cost added to your tax bill. Okay, I'm ready to transition to options.
Thank you, Rhonda. Okay, for the master plan options, last fall we had, you may remember this dizzying spreadsheet of the 8 options that were on the table. And through work from the facilities steering committee, there's kind of 3 high-level decisions that were made. And the first one was the preference for no renovation options. If you recall in the fall that any of the options had Hilltop as a new build because its problems aren't solvable through renovation. So there's this question of equity. Did it make sense to have a new build at Hilltop, but yet renos at Elm and Vermont? And then secondly, when we kind of got into the discussion of what a renovation looks like, most of these buildings have load-bearing exterior walls, interior load-bearing walls. And you would end up with a day where not all of the spaces are actually meeting the requirements you have. For example, your student dining room, there's no way to make that just a little bit bigger. Those walls are all load-bearing walls. So anyway, that was kind of the conversation around that. And so there was a direction to eliminate the renovation options. So off come A2, B2, C2, and D2. Next up was the conversation around the middle school. If you remember, the B series options would have put K3s, one at Elm, one at Hilltop, and one at Vermont, and add 4th grade to the middle school by adding an addition on top of where the music rooms are. And there wasn't a lot, there was some interest in exploring that, but it wasn't a lot of support. So the facilities steering committee decided to pull that one. Off comes B1. And then lastly, we had the D series. The D series was 1-4s at Elm, Vermont, Hilltop, with all-day kindergarten at Hilltop. And this also piqued the interest of some, but as we kind of got through it, there was just a lack of support around the idea of everyone's kindergartners going to Hilltop and then coming back to the neighborhood schools. So off comes D1. So we were left with A1 and C1. The facilities steering committee thought we needed a rebrand because comparing A1 to C1 felt a little awkward. So we have option blue, the former A1. So option blue is 3 new K4s. And then option white. And option white is 2 new K2s and 1 3 4. And before we kind of dive into the details of blue versus white, just want to start by saying everything we talked through tonight, and Gina talked through about secure vestibules and classroom sizes and mention spaces and art and music, etc. All those are going to be solved by either blue or white. So kind of file that in the back of your brain that any of these new build options would address those. It's really down to grade configuration and location. So existing lay of the land, we've got Elm at 193 students as a K4, Vermont 204 students as a K4, and Hilltop 277 students as a K4. And you can see our total square footage for all 3 added together. Option blue is the option that has 3 new K4s. We designed Elm in Vermont for 200 student capacity, and Hilltop for a 350 student capacity. The budgets, we have new budgets for the new construction, and you can see the size increases from the existing that I mentioned before, the total square footage of proposed, and the total planning budget for new construction. We have to add to that the cost of the abatement and demos of your 3 schools, and then also factor in some budgets for swing space for those 3 schools. The total budget, $68.4 million for option blue. Potential advantages and drawbacks. And I want to frame this that these are advantages and drawbacks that came from the steering committee comparing blue to white. So compared to option white, some of the advantages of blue are it preserves the uniqueness of the small primary schools. This option promotes walkability. There are fewer drop-offs for families if you've got K-4 siblings that can all be at a single school. We're minimizing transitions between buildings in this option, and there's opportunities for K-4 mentorship in the same building. And some drawbacks compared to option white is less efficient and more expensive delivery of education services. This is a bit of a nuanced idea, though, around the idea that there are more teachers traveling at more locations in this option blue, and also some more duplication of not only services but learning materials. Less collaboration with staff at grade levels, a little bit harder to balance class sizes since each class is smaller. One section of half day at kindergarten and Hilltop, and then this continued impact of no set attendance zone for K-4. Next, option white. This is the one that has a pair of new K2s. Vermont designed for 250, Elm designed for 200, and Hilltop designed for 300. The planning budget, square footage proposed in budget, cost for abatement and demo, as well as swing space, gets us right to that same 68.4 budget. And potential advantages and drawbacks, again, comparing to option blue. Advantages, more efficient, less expensive delivery of services, materials, less travel for teachers. Enhanced collaboration with staff at all the grade levels. More flexibility with student placement. And then slightly larger primary schools, as Hilltop gets a little bit smaller, a little easier to balance class sizes. And some drawbacks compared to option blue, there's less walkability in this plan. There's slightly larger primary schools, so I think this is conceived as both an advantage and a potential drawback. There are more student transitions between buildings, which means potentially more drop-offs per family. And then the idea of potentially siblings being split between buildings and the challenges that represents for parents. And then a loss of mentorship opportunities as we're taking the older peers out of the mix. So in summary, option blue against option white. You can see again, option blue is all new K4s, and option white are 2 new K2s and a 3-4. K2s being at Elm in Vermont, and the 3-4 being at Hilltop. Again, to repeat this, both option blue and option white address the educational needs of the district. So it's really about the different grade configurations. Swing space. When we did the middle school, and I was under construction, we parked all 600 students in middle school out on the high school baseball field. Anyone remembers that? But that happened here at Wyoming. That was 600 students. And those come in modular buildings that have individual classrooms and corridors. They do surprise some folks about how nice those things can be. So we wanted to kind of introduce this idea of swing space. On the left is the existing Elm floor plan. And on the right is a proposal to temporarily house those students in 2 modular buildings. One building could house your second grade, first grade, special ed, kindergarten, and some office. And the second building could house 4th, 3rd, library, special ed, art, music, and clinic. So just want to introduce that concept. Now we don't know where these are going. Anyone have a yard? 3 years. We are actively looking for sites, and that process is ongoing, and our goal is by fall, prior to the vote, having clarity around where your students are going specifically. At Hilltop, I will mention that at Elm, you don't see a cafeteria, and you don't see a student gymnasium in the swing space. So this option is conceived to be attached to another building where the students could go into for gym and student dining. A Hilltop, an existing footprint on the left, and a proposed 2-pillar solution for Hilltop, which is a bit bigger. You can see how the different grades are accounted for. And at Hilltop, we do add some space for multi-purpose and library, because it's potentially, depending on where Hilltop temporary swing space lands, this may not have the opportunity for students to lead into a neighboring gym or a student dining room. And next up, Vermont, existing footprint on the left, and this would be just like Elm, a 2-modular build solution to house all the students during instruction. So hang with us. We're actively looking for sites for those, and that process is ongoing. I just want to introduce this idea about swing space and where the students will be housed as things move on. A survey. The district has hired a professional public opinion researcher and pollster. They are at work doing a survey this month, the month of March. The data from that will be shared after it's collected sometime later this spring. And then the results, of course, will help determine right at the data point to the steering committee and to the board about the decision moving forward. And then next steps, always go to the district website. We'll come back for Community Forum 3 in late spring of 24. We'll share the results of the survey, and we'll share kind of where we're landing on the final master plan option. The board will have the opportunity to approve that in June, and then we'll come back in early fall for Community Forum number 4, with such as site plans, floor plans, swing space detail plans. So as you're heading into the election, you have a lot of clarity around what the plan is. Community vote on November 5th. Design would be approximately 1 year following, and construction, say, starting in spring of 26, finishing up in 27, 28, depending on what the final construction plan and schedule is like. And with that, Tim, you want to facilitate the chat? Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Rhonda. Again, appreciate you being here to be engaged in this conversation. In just a moment, we will switch gears, and again, like I shared, we'll have our committee members, our steering committee members, come down to the front if you have questions, additional questions above and beyond this information. We invite you to come down, have some personal conversations with our committee members. We'll all be up here. And also, I would just direct individuals to the website where we populated the website with all of this information. We know it's a lot to take in tonight if you haven't seen this before. So I'd encourage you to look at that and reach out with any questions again that you do have. But we will be available here for a while here this evening.